Just try to imagine 37 million iPhones. That's how many Apple sold in just the last 3 months of 2011.
I had never thought, ever, in a dedicated way, about how they were made.
For performer Mike Daisey, that is the centerpiece of a monologue, the agony and the ecstasy of Steve Jobs.
Shenzhen is a city of 14 million people. It is larger and denser than New York City. It is the third largest city in all of China and is the place where almost all of your comes from.
The show is an onstage expose of working conditions at a factory in Shenzhen, owned by a company called Foxconn, which manufactures electronics under contract for practically every major brand you can name, including Apple.
Foxconn is the biggest company you've never heard of. Foxconn makes over 50% of all the electronics in the world. 2 hours of my first day at that gate, I met workers who were 14 years old. I met workers who were 13 years old. I met workers who were 12. Do you really think Apple doesn't know?
Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to everyone. Without wasting our time, so let's move on to our first question. Do you think Apple should be responsible for ethical lapses made by individuals further down its supply chain? Why or why not? But before that, let me explain to you guys what responsible business is. Let's go. Alright, so being a responsible business means aiming for the highest standards of ethical business practice with everyone you deal with, including employees, customers, and also suppliers. Suppliers play a major role in your business, and nurturing good relationships is key to your success. Depending on the nature of your business, your supply chain may be quite complex and include not only those suppliers that you deal with every day, but also those that supply your suppliers and with whom you may not have a direct relationship. There are a few legal requirements for you to take responsibility for the behavior of your suppliers. However, it can be very positive for your business to consider the ethical dimensions. Okay, so to answer our first question, our group agrees that Apple should take responsibilities for ethical issues occur by individuals further down its supply chain because they are hired by them, which eventually could reflect positively or negatively on the company. Once they hired them, it means that they agreed to take responsibility for its suppliers, including individuals further down its supply chain. Also, those individuals contribute in some ways to generating the finished product such as iPhone, Apple Watch, MacBook, and other Apple's products. Apple also have the power to influence how suppliers and suppliers of their suppliers conduct their business in relation to Apple products, because the company has the power to take the business away and not associate themselves with those conducting unethical practice. Besides the argument following the they should because they can, they also should to truly be corporate socially responsible and not just make a nice PR campaign where they show what a nice company Apple is. How Apple can influence them is by enforcing Apple's own policies, by assessing and closely partnering with the suppliers at every point in their supply chain. In 2005, the Apple Supplier Code of Conduct and the Supplier Responsibility Standard were developed based on their work to safeguard working conditions at their manufacturing suppliers' facilities and in alignment with international labor and human rights standards, including those from the International Labour Organization and industry-leading health and safety standards. Their standards supplement their code by providing additional clarity regarding Apple's requirement. Apple suppliers must meet these standards to be in compliance with the code. Suppliers are assessed against the code and standard through rigorous Apple managed assessment and other third-party audit programs. This is to ensure that the people in their supply chain are safe at work, that they are treated with dignity and respect, and that throughout the process of building their products, our planet is protected. Hence, through the Supplier Code of Conduct, which outlines Apple's ethical standard for the manufacture of their products, Apple can influence them and decide who can be their suppliers. In the event that a smelter or a refiner is unable or unwilling to meet Apple's requirements, they remove them from their supply chain. Apple has done this since 2009, and as a result, they have removed 123 smelters and refiners from their chain. However, like case studies say, there are tens of thousands of tin miners and tons of middlemen, so regulating where the product is actually coming from is hard. Regulation that control these circumstances are controlled by the Indonesian government, and them allowing child labor laws. Apple doesn't support the laws, but by pulling out of Indonesia, it doesn't stop the practice, so Apple choose to stay engaged and attempt to drive changes on the ground instead. So, in conclusion, Apple should conduct the better standard of ethical in all their activities. Therefore, supplier will always be ethical in each part of its business, including relationships, works on, sourcings, and tasks. Apple should focus on the better standard norms of social and ecological obligation and ethical conduct. Whether your suppliers are using child labor, poor working conditions, siphoning off your intellectual property, involved in organized crime, money laundering, or corrupt practice, you could and most likely will be held accountable by your customers, employees, and other stakeholders for their actions. It is not enough anymore to take a blind eye and hope these issues go away. Regulators, whistleblowers, media, and activist non-governmental organization NGO will make sure that supply chain issues stay top of mind for companies and consumers alike. You will be held liable whether you like it or not, knew about it, or condone the activity. Alright, for the second question, should Apple continue to work with the suppliers in an effort to change practice, or should they stop working with every supplier, even the conscientious one, to make sure no bad apples are getting through? Let me ask my friend, Afifa.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So let's move to the next question. As we know, Apple Incorporation is the one of the most profitable smartphone manufacturers in the world. Most of its component has been supplied by the manufacturers all around the world. As an example, China is the biggest manufacturers for the Apple product. Due to the wide supply chain that involve the biggest numbers of the supplier, Apple Incorporation have faced the unresolved ethical dilemma such as the low wages, poor working conditions, and environmental issues. As an example, currently Apple Incorporation has faced the worldwide criticism regarding to the China manufacturer supplier, which is Foxconn. It has been reported that Foxconn has violated the China law and also the Apple internal standard to producing the iPhone 11 through the forced overtime, unpaid bonuses, and also hiring illegally too much temporary workers. Therefore, based on the current ethical issue that happened in China and also ethical issue that happened in Indonesia as been discussed in the case study, in my opinion, Apple Incorporation should continue dealing with the all suppliers in effort to change practices. If the Apple Incorporation decide to have the ethical issues arise remain unsolved, Apple Incorporation may tarnish their brand reputation, their trust, their status, loss of the customer because of their unethical decision. Responding to an unethical situation of its company supplier, Apple Incorporation shall take an action ethically by cooperating and coming up with the valuable information that could help resolve the ethical issues. Apple Incorporation may continue dealing with the all suppliers in effort to change practices by correcting the matter arise first. It can be happen by putting together plan to correct each of the violation and strengthening the internal compliance processes. Apple Incorporation already have several internal standards that should be complied by the supplier company, such as the Supplier Code of Conduct, Annual Supplier Responsibility Progress Report, and others. One of initiatives taken by the Apple Incorporation in addressing ethical issues that occurs in the supplier company is Corrective Action Plan. Based on the corrective action plan, if the violation has been discovered occurs in the supplier companies, Apple Incorporation will take an initiative by conducting an investigation and discuss the finding with the suppliers. And the suppliers will be given 90 days to resolve the issue and improving the management system to make sure the issue would not reoccur. Moreover, through this plan, Apple Incorporation also sent the Apple expert to the supplier side in order to assist the supplier to resolve the issue and also improving their management system. Next, Apple Incorporation also take an initiative to assessing all the suppliers' performance according to the Apple Code and Standard in order to drive change in the areas of labor and human rights, safety and health and environment. All the assessment has been recorded and has been reported as Annual Supplier Responsibility Progress Report. This annual supplier report shows an effort made by Apple Incorporation to become more transparent regarding to the employees' condition in the supplier factories. It also can be considered as Apple Incorporation initiative to improve life of the employees. In addition, it also helped to increase the sense of accountability among the suppliers' factories to comply with Apple Code and Standard. Last but not least, in order to change practices, Apple Incorporation shall practice a good communication either towards the supplier, workers and also the public. It is because a good communication could be a key to drive change within an organization. As an example, Apple Incorporation shall maintain a strong and regular communication with each of its suppliers to avoid misunderstanding to be occur. In conclusion, Apple Incorporation may continue dealing with the all supplier by keep improvise and strengthening its internal compliance standard, annually assessing the performance of the supplier, and having a good communication in effort to change practices. Hence, by correcting the matter arise and admitting to its fault, Apple Incorporation may maintain their brand reliability and their business ethics standard. So that's all for me. Thank you. So let's move to another presenter. Walin, do you think consumers should expect it to take into consideration the ethical track record of the company when making a purchase?
Thank you so much, Afifa, for your questions. So, what do you guys think? Is it a yes or a no? Okay, first of all, if you are wondering how is the company's ethical record can relate to the consumer? Okay, let's see. Unethical behavior can impact the consumer when the company provides unsafe product, deception and unfairness in advertising, and also price fixing. So in my opinion, it is a yes. The consumer should be expected to take into account the ethical track record of companies when making purchases. As we know, consumer plays a major role when it comes to purchasing stuff and choosing which companies they wanted to go for, right? So I think they need to take into account the ethical track records of companies so that they will know and aware to whom they've been giving their supports to. If consumers didn't take into account the ethical track record of companies and turns out giving support to companies that actually have a bad ethic, it might lead to the company to make more ethical issue in the future. This is because they knew that most of the consumers don't care and actually take this matter seriously. And we can actually see that if we take this matter seriously, those companies might realize their wrongdoings and change the way they operate in order to attract their customers back. For example, based on this article, more than half, which is 56% of US American consumers stop buying from companies that are suspected to act unethically and socially irresponsible. They rather waive the product even though there's no substitute available, and this has made more and more consumers to feel that ethical issues are actually important for them to be aware of. Hence, this has proven that if the consumer play their part, it can surely overcome these problems. This is because without consumer and buyers, the business will be badly impacted and their sales will definitely drop since there's no people that that support their products and services. In conclusions, when consumers take into account the ethical track record of the companies, it will then help to produce more companies that have a good ethic in producing products, delivering service, or even dealing with their customers. That's all from me. Oh wait, Ilani, I have a question for you. Do you know any other brands that are having ethically questionable business practice? And if you were to know the products were produced under ethically questionable practice, does it affect your decision to purchase it?
Thank you, Alin, for the question. Do you guys know any products or brand that are having ethical questionable business practice? Let me tell you. Does anyone here a fan of Coca-Cola? Did you know Coca-Cola is also listed of one of those brands that is having issue in their business practice? Back in 1997, Coca-Cola was accused of practicing channel stuffing. Channel stuffing is a practice of shipping extra inventories to the wholesaler and retailer at an excessive rate. It is to inflate their figures of earning and sales. When a product is shipped out, it is counted as sale. Coca-Cola had sent extra bottles to Japanese bottlers to inflate their profit. This is to show that there is a high demand in their product. Although Coca-Cola had settled the accusation, the Security and Exchange Commission had concluded that it does occur in Coca-Cola. Due to the ethical issues, the stock price of Coca-Cola remains the same for over 10 years. This is because people started to boycott the product as soon as the news spread out. At some point, every product made by Coca-Cola was pulled off from the shelf in some stores. It has affected the track record of the consumer towards Coca-Cola because they are relying on the ethical questionable business practice for profit making. Other than that is Nestle. Nestle aggressively pushed their breastfeeding formula to the less economically developed country to easily gain their profit. According to the International Baby Food Action Network, Nestle had used an unethical method to promote their infant formula to the poor mothers in developing countries. Until now, Nestle still remains as one of the most boycotted companies in the world, especially the Americans. It does reflect the track record of their customers as they had made an unethical approach on how they promote their product. Not only that, Nestle also has involved in many more ethical issues that had made them lose trust from their customers. In my point of view, it does affect my decision to purchase. Who would want to support something that may harm us as a consumer? We would pay something for a good reason and we are not paying to get harmed. For example, in food and beverage industry, they are required to follow a strict standard operation procedure or SOP in food handling. Why? Because they are serving people with their product to be eaten. Hygiene should be taken as an important aspect, mostly in the kitchen where the product is being prepared. When knowing the workers are not following a proper SOP, it shows that the product is produced under ethical questionable condition. People like me will feel uneasy to eat the food and decided not to purchase again in the future. That's all for me. Thank you. So Fatini, if you were a part of a third-party regulating body, how would you deal with the ethically questionable business practices in a multinational corporation like Apple?
Thank you so much, Ilani, for the questions. Anyway, my name is Nik Fatini Nurisha, and today's video is kind of interesting to me as I've been using Apple's product for quite long, and it's kind of good as I can gain more knowledge and know more about the products, the brands itself, whether they are good products or whether they are good brands or whether they have a bad background brands and whatsoever. So as we know that Apple is one of the multinational corporations, and Ilani has asked me if I were a third party of regulating body, how would I deal, how would I react with the unethical behavior, the unethical business practices of Apple? Should I just leave it to them to solve their problems by themselves, or whether should I just stay silent, or should I do something for that? So these questions actually have triggered me to know more what is the unethical behavior that Apple have made. All this while I just using their products, but I didn't know that Apple have made a few mistakes, a few unethical behaviors. So this question is really good, and I've been research a few things that Apple have made during the process, the procedures, and also the producing the products. So let's take a look of their unethical behavior during within the company. Apple Incorporation is a multinational American technology company which sells consumer electronics that have been claimed by critics to combine stolen or purchased designs that it claims are its own original creations. Criticism of Apple includes allegations of unethical business practices such as anti-competitive behavior, rash litigation, and dubious test tactics, their production methods involving the use of sweatshop labor, customer service issues involving misleading warranties and insufficient data security, and also concerns about environmental destruction. Alright. Other than that, manufacturing company Apple have also faces a more deep-seated problem. This involves the millions of people employed in its supply chain, which is largely located in China, with the major contracted Foxconn. So the research has shows that human rights, environmental, and ethical problems persist inside the Apple's vast global supply chains. The low pay, poor working conditions, and environmental hazards in supplier factories in China and across Asia are sources of long-running controversies. In the past, suicides of workers subject to intensive work regimes in these factories have shocked Apple into action. Apple does address these disturbing issues in its annual Supplier Responsibility Progress Report. Progress has been uneven and limited, but the company has created the appearance of corporate social responsibility. Any reputational damage does not seem to undermine the financial results. Still, for a company as successful as Apple, the failure to find a permanent solution to recurrent environmental and labor issues in its global value chain is not acceptable. So these are among of the problems that Apple have faced during their process and producing their product. However, mistreating employees is the thing that I want to explain more. This has become a familiar scenario in small as well as big companies who make employees work for long hours and underpay them. Many employees are made to work under stressful conditions and are subjected to mental and even sexual harassment. In the wake of finding cheap labor, many companies in developed nations hire sweatshops in third world countries to get their goods manufactured in bulk. The conditions in these workplaces are worse than one can even imagine. The tech giant Apple has been using the services of Foxconn, Taiwanese manufacturing company that has been manufacturing the coveted iPhone. Foxconn has been accused of employing child slaves working in hazardous conditions for 10 hours a day all through the week. And I think this is a serious issue that Apple have made. In order to solve it, I think all I can do is just reveal their unethical behavior to the people by using social media as a platform. This is because social media is the best medium that we can interact with the outsider people. Perhaps by doing this, it may call out all the people to work together to resolve the issue, such as ban the brands itself and many other ways. So I think that's all from us today. We hope that you guys can get some input from our discussion today, and I think I think that all my friends today have discussed a lot about the apples and about how to solve the problems and everything. So thank you so much, guys. We really hope that you enjoy this video, and thank you so much, and just stay safe at home. Thank you, guys. Bye.